Welcome to this introduction to the test drive for the Kelverion Runbook Studio. So what does the test drive contain? The test drive has an installed instance of the Kelverion Runbook Studio. There are some integration modules to be used. The Kelverion Automation Portal is deployed into your virtual machine, and there's also some example data, Runbook and automation assets populated to an Azure account. This introduction is going to show you how to configure the evaluation licenses for the Runbook Studio, the automation portal. It's going to show you how to configure the management server. Also, we're going to create some local and Azure connection assets. We're going to create a Runbook, and we're going to make use of the smart activities. Okay, so if you get stuck, if you've got feedback, or if you want to arrange a longer trial, please drop an email to info@kelverion.com and someone will help you out. Okay, so let's run through the configuration. You can see I've got a text file here which contains the IP address that I'm going to connect to, my username and password. You will have received that information in an email, but the format will basically be the same. So I am going to pop up a remote desktop connection, paste in the IP address and connect using the username and password. The username, passwords and server names, those are all going to be slightly different for your details. It's an individual test drive that's configured for each person, and it's slightly different details. When you see the certificate warning, you should just confirm that the name on the certificate matches the name in the email address and you'll be fine. So the virtual machine that's been stood up, it's freshly spun up. The user account is not logged in before, so it needs to go through creating that user profile for the first time, so that's going to take a couple of minutes as it starts up. You're going to see the network discovery dialog and server manager pop up. We just need to click through those dialogues and let the system carry on. It's quicker if we just wait and get those out of the way, so just 1 second, we should see the network discovery. Just see that it's just finishing building the profile. There we go, network discovery. So I am going to click no, and then server manager is going to start up, and we are just going to close that down. So after server manager starts up, I'm going to pop up an administrative PowerShell, and we are going to configure the authorization key on the management server. Oh, sorry, first thing I should point out that there is a directory in C called __ test drive, which contains the temporary license files that you're going to use, and also, most importantly, config info. This is a text file which contains all of the information that you're going to need for the test drive, so usernames, logins, IP addresses, that kind of thing. So we can see there's SQL login details. There's also logins for Azure. So the first thing said, we're going to pop up an administrative PowerShell, and we are going to configure the authorization key. So create -ka management server authorization key, or just type create dash and then hit tab, and that will complete for you. So I'm going to confirm that, and then I am going to copy that GUID. Okay, once we've copied that, I'm going to paste it into the text file for future reference. I'm going to make sure that we save that text file just in case we close it down. Okay, the management server is actually used for licensing the integration packs. The eval licenses have all been copied into the right place to be used. So the configuration is very straightforward. So if we click on Start and Kelverion Runbook Studio, when it starts up, it's going to recognize that there is no license at the moment, so we are going to select that evaluation license from __ test drive. You can see it's recognized there's just one file in there that ends in KASL, and it's checking that license, and we can see it's valid, so we can click OK and move on. The first real thing that we need to do with the Runbook Studio is we need to tell it about the Azure Active Directory that our subscription lives within, and our automation account. So again, config info, that contains the Azure tenant ID. As I said, you're going to see slightly different details in here, but there will be a GUID within there for you to copy and paste out. The application ID and the redirect URI are already the right values, so once we've done that, we can just hit OK. So now we're ready to log into Azure Active Directory using the Runbook Studio. So I've grabbed the username for Azure out, and I've hit the connect button on the toolbar. I'm going to paste that in and hit next, and then grab the password. Okay, and once this is connected, it will show us the automation account which has been stood up specifically for you. So we can see the subscription and the account details there. You're only going to have access to a single automation account. If you've got multiple subscriptions and multiple accounts in the real world, the Runbook Studio lets you manage them all from one place. We can see there are a number of resources that are configured there. So that authorization key, let's add that into the Azure connection. So this is the connection which is used at runtime, either on the hybrid worker or within Azure. So I'm pasting that into the authorization key. I need to tell the Runbook Studio to use SQL authentication because our database is in Azure and does not support Windows authentication. And I'm also going to paste the password in. Obviously the password and the authorization key are sensitive, so whenever we edit them within the Runbook Studio we have to populate both of those fields. Okay, so that's the runtime connection. We're now going to create the design time connection to that database, and this gives us our smart abilities. So when we're using the Runbook Studio, it lets the Runbook Studio go off and discover information about that database that we're going to connect to. So a new database connection. I've selected the type as being SQL Server, and I'm going to paste in there the SQL Server name, the username, and finally the password. You'll note that we don't need the authorization key for the design time connection. It's only when the integration modules are executing in Azure that we need the authorization key. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at that database so we can see what should be discovered when we create our first runbook to talk to the database. So I'm just going to speed this bit up a little bit. Starting the Management Studio for this first time can be a little bit slow. So again, copying and pasting those details in. Like config info is your best friend. I probably should remember these, but as they're auto-generated every time, I can never remember the last few digits of each of the usernames. Okay, so let's just start to remember those, and we are going to connect. And once we connect, we're going to see that there are two user databases. There's Automation Data and Automation Portal. The Automation Data is just example data for you to make use of. We've created a handful of tables in there for use in the examples. So if we select that from the test drive users there, we should see there are about 10 users created in there, all with cartoon names, just so we can see something that looks vaguely like real data. So we can see a number of users in there. The other database that we're going to take a look at is the Automation Portal database down at the bottom there. And that's being used by the Automation Portal itself, which we have not yet configured. So I'm going to start up an Internet Explorer window, and you should see that the home page is set to be the local host. Again, same username and password, just to try and keep everything straightforward. Obviously in a real world deployment this would all be way more secure and we wouldn't have text files left around on the desktop. Okay, so that is connecting now to the Automation Portal. As this is the first connection to the portal, it's going to take a moment for the application pools to warm up. So we're just going to click through some of these default dialogues in IE. And sorry, I need to switch back to the Automation Portal tab. Okay, so we can see the Automation Portal again saying, oh, you're not correctly licensed. So I'm going to go into the admin menu and then settings. And once that loads up, we can scroll down to the bottom of that page and we can see we can upload a license. And you guessed it, C:\__ test drive contains a temporary evaluation license. And we're looking for the file there, the cal file, Kelverion Automation Portal.cal. Okay, and import. And if we just scroll down again, we can see it says that our license is valid, which is great. Okay, so we're going to scroll back up and we are going to take a look at the home page for the portal. And you can see I've configured one service within there and a couple of offerings. If we take a look at the first offering, which is just some test data, so I'm going to populate that with my details. Yep, okay, you can see it's very straightforward to populate a request in the automation portal. What we've tried to do with the automation portal is keep it very simple from the user's point of view to make sure that they're just providing the right details to start our automations off. So I'm just going to confirm that request, and we can see we now have request ID number 10 that's within there. It's in a new state at the moment. That means that it's ready for automation to populate that. Remember request ID 10, and we can see the details of my request. Okay, so now we've got everything set up. Let's create our first runbook. So in the Runbook Studio, I am going to name the runbook. As you may or may not be aware, each of the runbooks that you upload to Azure Automation, they all need to have unique names. So just otherwise we end up with untitled 1 to n. So I switched to the on-premises resources view, and that shows me the integration modules that I can drag and drop into the activity. You can see we've got a search button there, and I've now searched for Kelverion, and it's showing me all of the integration modules with Kelverion in the name. I'm going to drag in a select SQL rows activity onto the palette, and you can see there's a little spanner there which tells me that there's something that needs to be configured. So you remember earlier we configured our smart connection. I've selected that, and it's showing me the databases that are available. It's gone off and queried, and it's now showing me the tables that exist within that database that I can pull data from. And when I select the table, the Runbook Studio understands the structure of that database as well. So it's able to help us build a query for a select, or if we're doing an insert, it knows which fields are mandatory and which are optional. So you can see as I'm building a filter now, it's all drag, point and click. I've selected the ID field is equal to, and you'll remember the request that we created was ID number 10. So we've created our filter, still the spanner, still telling us we need to do some more work. So it's telling us that we need to select the connection, and this is the runtime connection now. This is the asset that we added the authorization key into. Again, we named it automation data just to keep things simple. So we've now got a complete runbook. If we wanted to add some parameters, you can see very straightforward to add the parameters in the Runbook Studio to configure the logging and tracing. We can configure webhooks and schedules from the Runbook Studio easily as well. So I've published that runbook. We can see it's successfully uploaded, and I'm going to now switch to the Azure resources again. And we can see with the little yellow star next to it, our new draft runbook is there, in addition to the test runbook one that was created earlier, which is published. So I'm going to test that draft runbook. Okay, in the testing pane you can select where that runbook will be executed. If there were hybrid workers, those will be listed there. Hybrid worker groups would be listed there, and Azure will pick a hybrid worker from the group. I'm just going to hit the start, and we can see on the status button there, the moment it stopped, and that has just switched to new, which means that the request has been queued. In a moment we should see that switch to running. Okay, activating and then running, and then in a moment it's going to switch to completed. So this is actually executing on Azure now. So the testing, it's not a simulation, it's actually a live test. It executes, and if the runbook has effects, then those effects will take place. And we can see that the output is an object there with all of the properties that we'd expect from the SQL database. We can see the data that was entered into the request is all of the published data. So there you go, that's your first runbook with the Runbook Studio. The next steps, there's a tutorial that takes you through much more slowly the process of building those runbooks. Again, if you've got any questions, need help, or need to provide some feedback, info@kelverion.com. Otherwise, if you've got any other questions or you'd like to see information about any of our other products, please visit www.kelverion.com. Thanks for watching.